Hey, thank you everybody, and welcome to Postcard from the Edge of Normal with Glenn Mangurian. I'm Tim Manella, and I'm joined by Jamie Simchick, one of the owners of Harkness Cowork. Harkness Cowork is a collaborative working space that's going to be located on the second floor of the Capitol Commons building in downtown Concord, New Hampshire. Inspired by an incubator study commissioned by the City of Concord and its Chamber of Commerce, Harkness gets its name from the philanthropist Edward Harkness, a graduate of St. Paul's School in Concord, class of 1893. His father was an early investor in John Rockefeller's Standard Oil and left Edward with an incredible amount of money. Harkness commendably made many contributions to charitable causes, including education, perhaps the most transformative of which was a gift to Phillips Exeter Academy, challenging the school to revolutionize its educational system. The resulting creation was a collaborative learning table, which encouraged those around the table to learn from each other and grow together. Until about a month and a half ago, I'd have said that the learning table was Harkness's most impactful gift. Though he could not have known it at the time, Harkness's gift in 1922 of 22 acres of land in Washington Heights, New York, to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, which would later merge into New York Presbyterian Hospital, is having an incredible impact in our current moment. Without further ado, to talk more about us and our current moment, I'll turn it over to Glenn Mangurian. And Glenn, I'll relinquish my screen so that you can share yours.
Okay. Here we are. Great. So thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me to join you. I am down in Hingham, Mass, which is about 20 miles south of Boston. It's on the coast and it's a very nice community. I grew up in Arlington, which is just west of Cambridge, next town from Cambridge. Let me tell you how I'm connected to Jamie. So my son and Jamie both attended the University of Michigan. And Jamie was getting a dual master's degree and my son was getting an MBA. My son Mark, now lives in Denver, and he got married about 2.5 years ago, and I met Jamie at Mark's wedding. So that's and Jamie's been to my house, and we went to the casino together for lunch, and so that's our connection. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a retired business executive. I was a senior partner in a 600-person management consulting company. In 2001, I suffered a freak injury to my spinal cord, and I now operate from a wheelchair. So I am permanently paralyzed. Let's see if I try. Maybe you can see well. You can see that I'm moving. Trust me, I'm in a wheelchair. And I believe Tim sent out my Harvard Business Review article. Is that right?
That's right.
So if you read it, you get a background. You get some background. It's interesting. When I was in the hospital, 2001, I said, someday I'm going to write an article about my experience in the Harvard Business Review, and I'm not ready to write it. So it took me about 5 years, and on the 5th anniversary, I decided that I'd write an article. And if you know anything about the Harvard Business Review, it's probably the most prestigious business publication, but at the same time, it is also really hard to get published in it. And you have to write a proposal. Unless, of course, you're Clay Christensen or Michael Porter, then you just submit the article. But for me and most people, you write a proposal. I wrote a 12-page proposal, and it was called the Conquer Adversity, the 7 Disciplines of Resilient Leaders. Very consulting-like proposal. And they called me and they said that they really liked my idea, but they wanted a first-person article. And I told them that last time I wrote a first-person anything was in the 4th grade when I wrote what I did over the summer. But I said, I don't know if I can do that. And they say, you don't understand. We've already accepted you. We're going to work to make sure you write a good article. And so that's the result that you saw. We actually wrote that article in about 2.5 weeks. And it was published in 2007. And it's titled Realizing What You're Made Of. I didn't put the title on it. They put the title on it. Since my injury, I've continued to be very active. Although I'm, physically, mobily challenged. I've taught at both UMass and Northeastern at the graduate level. I write. I do a little consulting every now and then. Sometimes I get paid. Most of the time I don't. And occasionally I do a little speaking. And I write a monthly essay, and I really work it's called Pushing the Edge, and I really try to keep it positive and also thought-provoking. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the current situation that we're all in, and I'm going to draw on my own personal experience, because many of us right now are asking the question, what the heck is the new normal going to be? And your guess is as good as mine, by the way. We'll know the new normal when we know the new normal. We could probably speculate about what some of the characteristics are. But I think one of the things I'm going to draw on is my own personal journey from old normal to my own new normal that happened in 2001. Because if you can imagine getting a spinal cord injury and being active one day and like 3 days later, you can't move your legs, it's a pretty traumatic experience, both physically and emotionally. Yet Jamie's spent some time with me, and Tim, we've done one Zoom call. I'm a pretty positive person, and I relate to my injury as something that happened, but I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I sort of looked at the alternative to being positive, and I don't like it. So I decided that, I'm going to do what I can. And I was a very successful business guy, but I'm going to say that since my injury, I probably have achieved as much, if not more, in different ways. But here's what's interesting, and this happened to me. I had a spontaneous disc rupture. So I didn't have any trauma, I didn't fall, I wasn't in a car accident. A disc ruptured in the middle of my back without any provocation. And the pain was so great, we went to the emergency room. And then after they did an MRI, they saw the problem that the disc and rupture was pressing up against my spinal cord. But it happened very fast. But think back to Valentine's Day of this year and what you might have done on Valentine's Day with a significant other, or having trouble getting a reservation for a lunch or a dinner because everybody wanted to go, and rushing to the Hallmark store and buying a card and standing in line. And that was like only 2 months ago. So the first thing that happened to me is I went into shock. And, didn't we all go into shock that this is so surreal? It's like a movie we see on television or a book that we read. It's just very surreal. And after I got injured, my wife and I, for about 10 days, thought we were just in a bad dream. And that event, when you have a bad dream, you sort of want to shake yourself and wake yourself up. And isn't that how this sort of feels? This is a bad dream. And we're just waiting for the dream to be over. And we'll wake ourselves up. And some of us are now, coming to grips with the reality of things. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. At Thanksgiving of last year, if somebody said, we need to prepare for a pandemic, because, it's only a matter of time before a pandemic comes, it's pretty much an abstraction. By the way, even when an earthquake hits in Japan, it's an abstraction to us because we're not there. We're not experiencing it. And if we're all healthy right now, and most of the people, if not everybody we know, is healthy, it's an abstraction for us also. But because we went through this shock and people told us we got to stay in and don't go to work, we sort of followed them. But as time starts to go on, the abstraction and how many degrees of separation there are between you and somebody in that chain that actually is tested positive, if it's not one step, and if it's 2 steps, it's an abstraction. So if somebody in your family has, it's real. But if you don't know anybody, if you don't have it and you don't know anybody, it's an abstraction. And then the second aspect of this is how we view the public trust. So if you live in Manchester, to what degree do you trust the mayor of Manchester? To what degree do you trust the governor of New Hampshire? To what degree do you trust the president of the United States? And depending on where you come out on that, I think we started maybe a month ago in which we had to trust all these people, and we may not have the degrees of separation, but the risk is high, so I got to follow what they say. And as time goes on, some of that is going to erode, and what you're going to see is what you saw over the weekend, I guess, in Manchester, is people out saying, hey, we got to get back to normal. And whether it's in Manchester or whether it's in Atlanta, Georgia, or Lansing, Michigan, as time goes on, if it's not affecting you, you're going to say, well, it's too bad for the people in New York, but we're not New York. And So what that says to me is we're in a transition period to the new normal, and every person is going through that transition at a different speed. So some people are already saying, hey, I'm ready. And other people are living in fear. They don't know what the future is going to bring. They're afraid to go to the supermarket. They're afraid to have the cleaning person come into their house or come in contact with other people. And there's a spectrum. There's a whole spectrum of places you can be. And it'll be frustrating for people in different points on the spectrum to understand the other people on the spectrum. So as we're watching television and people are out protesting, saying we need to go back to work, and you're sitting in your house saying, why aren't they all wearing masks? And what are they all, where's the separation? And aren't they crazy? And they're going to go home and they're going to infect their spouse or their mother or their grandfather. It's irresponsible for them to be doing it. So that range of emotions is alive and well, and it's not flipping a switch and everybody flips it. It's a gradation. Now, let me ask you some rhetorical questions. I want you to think about your ending your 6-foot radius of not being in touch with people, and somewhere between now and a year from now. All right? And when would you feel comfortable going to the dentist? Would it be closer to now or closer to a year from now? That's the first question. How about going to a sporting event? Go see the Red Sox, go see the Patriots. Closer to now, or the beginning of when the season might start, or closer to a year from now when the Red Sox are, in first place, 2001. How about going to visit an elderly parent or grandparent? Closer to now, or more closer to a year from now? Sending child back to school. Allowing a child to go to the mall. Or you going out to a restaurant. So depending how you answered, and I just made those questions up, but depending on how you answered those, my guess is some were sooner rather than later. Some of those things were later. Maybe they were all later. Maybe they were all rather sooner. Let me tell you, personally, I'm worried. I'm worried. I'm not panicked, and I'm not complacent, and I'm not saying this too shall pass, although it will pass, but I'm worried. I'm vulnerable. I'm a vulnerable guy. I'm over 65 in age. I sit in a wheelchair. I have, health issues, some associated with my paralysis and some associated with the fact that I'm over 65. I was scheduled to have cataract operation. So now the question is, when do I want to have, and that's an elective thing, when do I want to have that? Do I want to have it? Maybe not. Maybe, probably for me, that's now a year out. I was scheduled to have it in March. Now, at best, it's a year out for me. So we're all going to proceed at, so we're all going to proceed in moving to whatever the new normal is on a different timetable. And we'll be frustrated with people that are either faster or slower than us. For me, I'm like 19 years into this, and I'm still adapting. I'm going to say it took me 3 years, maybe, to get to my 90% of coming to reality to it. You know, one of the things, is a quick story I'll tell you. By the way, some of our friends, I consider myself, I talked about myself as Glenn 2.0. And people, 99% of the people I interact with only know me in a wheelchair. They have no idea about my career, about my education. And by the way, if they don't even hear me talk and they just see me, they have no idea whether I'm articulate or not. When I first came home, after 2 months in the hospital, my first time out in public, I was rolling along and I would look at people and they would look away. Think about how many people in the course of a month you might see in a wheelchair. Probably not many, if any at all. So here I am and people are looking away, and I went home and I said, is this the way my life is going to be from now on? People looking away. So the next time I went out, I looked at people, but I smiled. And it was a completely different reaction. Everybody smiled back, and most people, without me saying a word, would say either good morning or good afternoon. Simple smile. So what I had to do was change the way I related to myself. So when I first went out, I don't know, I might have had a frown. I might have had I don't know what look I had, but it certainly wasn't inviting. And I changed how I looked and decided that I was going to look in a more positive way, and people completely related to me differently. So, you know, as we come out of this, we have to decide, we have to make some choices about how we're going to relate to the experience that we had, because it will be an indelible mark in our lives. Just like we think about 9/11 as, you know, pre 9/11, post 9/11, pre-internet, post-internet, there are certain events in our lives that are turning points, and we may not know how we're going to turn and what new things are going to become available to us. Let me just pose 2 areas that I think are going to have big changes. First of all, I think this will unleash more entrepreneurship and more creativity as people come up with ideas for businesses in the post-COVID world. That's my suspicion, is that there's going to be a big influx of innovation. Not all of it is going to take hold, but people are going to see hey, things have changed, and the biggest thing I think is how we relate to distance. Whether it's distance in a meeting, or distance with people, or distance going to work, or distance with school, or distance with my doctor. I think that healthcare and higher education, this will be the disruption that will sort of get them over the hump of change. I just at 10 o'clock this morning, I had been going to a clinic weekly, and I did telemedicine with my doctor. We used the camera. He did, there was an area that he on my foot that he needed to look at. I put the camera up to it. He looked at it, although not the same. He was very pleased with how things are going. And I will see him again next week, next Monday. Telemedicine. It'll be interesting to see what happens with colleges in September. And let's say they open. Well, now the question is, how many students will actually go back? Or will they take a gap year? Or will they say, I'm not sure I want to go to college? So we don't know. But boy, the colleges got to be doing some scenario planning, because some of the colleges are going to go out of business. They're going to go out of business. So let me throw it back to you, Tim, and see, we got time left, plenty of time left. What would you like to do?
So yeah, we have nearly a half hour left in the block that we have. If anyone has any sort of question or idea or something that they want to guide the rest of the conversation with, we can open up to that. And beyond that, Glenn, if you have any sort of discussion starters, we could do that as well.
Well, let's go with you if there are any questions of me.
Sure. Any questions?
Glenn, I'll throw out a question. So, you said it took you about 3 years to get to 90%, and I see a lot of parallels to what you're saying to this. How do you, is there, do you have any expectation on when we're gonna, notice that, sort of get to our 3 years, right? When we're gonna just get kind of comfortable in our own skin of the new situation?
Well, as I said, I think that's an individual decision and different paths. I'll just talk about myself. So when do I think? So the first thing is that this isn't as big a disruption for me as it is for all of you. And the reason is because I'm retired. Although my 401k, is a 301k, it's still a 301k. And so I'm not financially worried yet, let's say. I'm not physically worried right now, because I spent a lot of my time not interacting with people, all right? Not going to work, not interacting with people. And then the second thing is, I always ask myself, is this worse than being in a wheelchair? When something bad happens that could get me really angry and really aggravated, I catch myself and I say, okay, is this worse than being in a wheelchair? And I haven't found anything yet. So I say to myself, if I can live a good, productive life from a wheelchair, is this worse than that? And the answer is no. So although I'm worried, I don't feel as though this is going to impact my life as much as it will impact other people's lives. So I am still leery, though, because I'm vulnerable, of being around people that I don't know. And I think that that's going to last at least into the fall, and maybe beyond. Maybe beyond. I would tend to keep my distance. I have a mask. I haven't worn it yet because I don't go out, you know. My wife and I go out in our car. And if the weather, gets above 50 degrees, and we drive around, but we don't get out and go anyplace. So I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be interesting. I think sporting events are going to be indicators for us. I don't know how you play football. Maybe baseball. Golf is easier, but as we know, they're going to have golf tournaments, but you can't go to watch them. You can watch them on television. How about you?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, and I had another question about about your thought of any businesses that might spring up as a result of this too. But no, I think it's interesting splitting my time between New Hampshire and coming back to Boston today, because it's very quiet here in downtown Boston. But I was sort of thinking of my father saying something to the fact like, oh, I think executives are going to say, stop traveling. We can do this all remotely. And I was joking with him because I think I think I'd be happy for the last few years to have not had to travel and do meetings via Zoom or other things. But I was saying it's kind of a generational thing, I think, for him, where he thinks, and he's probably right to a certain degree, right, that person-to-person contact helps business get done. But if there's some hesitancy to do that or go to conferences, it might open up a way to where maybe a younger generation is actually excited to, have those meetings via phone call or Zoom and not travel as much. And this just happens to be the turning point that kind of makes that happen, rather than any other reason for that happening, like the cost of it.
I think you're right. I think that people that used to commute into Boston, let's say, however they commuted, whether they took public transportation. By the way, I could have asked, when's the next time you're going to get on a public bus or on the subway? But people who take public transportation or drove into Boston with a terrible commute of, an hour or more, have now been forced to work from home, let's say, if they could work from home. They said, gee, I can actually get stuff done from home. Do I really have to go drive to the office, every day? Why can't at least one day a week I do this? Or maybe one day a week I go into the office. So now the question is, what's the future of the office? How will offices be configured? Will there be more remote offices? So rather than have people drive to some central location, might there be satellites of little offices? Or can people just do things from home? And then what impact does that have on travel? Not just commuting travel, but let's say airplane travel and hotels and hospitality and, and all of that. So I think, again, it's the question of distance. How are we relating to distance, in which closeness was in, let's say, and distance was out? I think the pendulum might be swimming back, and then we haven't decided where the medium is. Where is it going to land? And it might land different places for different demographics. I think you're absolutely right. If you're 34 years old, you're going to relate to it differently than somebody that's 60 years old.
I guess I'll jump in, guys, if that's okay. So I have a couple of thoughts. I think certainly some of my concerns would certainly be the sporting events. When do we go back, to that, and even restaurants? But obviously, from a business standpoint, first of all, I want to say that I've been on the kind of work from home, that the whole traffic in Boston. I mean, I've said I could never, at this point in my life, I couldn't imagine driving down to Boston for work. I like staying up here in New Hampshire, and I'm comfortable here. So I've been on that bandwagon for quite some time in terms of working from home or just finding ways to remote office. Obviously, now that Tim and Jamie and well, I guess Chris and Laura, most of you know me. Glenn, you don't, but I do video work with Jamie, and I've done some with Laura, and I'm actually working on a project today that I'm sending on to Chris. So I've been in that solopreneur mode where it's comfortable for me. Literally, my bed's over here and my desk is here. So I've been in that mode for quite some time. I think it's a lot more comfortable. So I'm excited to see people kind of finally understanding the point that you shouldn't have to stress yourself out trying to go to the office, fight traffic, do all that, get all dressed up and then sit there and be grumpy and go home and eat dinner and do it all over again the next day. So I think that that's a positive. For me as a video producer, I think my questions are, when, obviously I've done the Winterfest videos for Concord. Does things like market days take place? Do farmers markets take place? I like doing travel and tourism videos. I was actually working on something today for, obviously it's Patriots Day down in Boston. So today would have been the marathon, and today would have been the Red Sox game in the morning. But obviously for me, I work with the Greater Merrimack Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau. They would have been a part of the ceremony at Northbridge today at Minuteman National Historical Park, where they fired the shot heard around the world. That's not taking place. Do events like that still take place? Do amusement parks still open? So I don't know. I'm just trying to think through the video side of things, because I really like doing events. I really like doing the lifestyle brands and the activities. Is that something I need to be wedding videos? Are these things I need to be reconsidering? Wedding videos, perhaps the video helps for people that don't want to have 200 people attend their wedding. They'd rather keep it to 50 and share it via video. So I don't know. That's kind of where my head's going. How do I use this to my advantage, and how do I not get as a video producer, how do I not get run over by a changing industry that I wasn't able to keep up on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A thought dump for you, I guess.
And Chris is in the video business also?
Chris is in marketing, so.
Oh, you're in marketing. Okay.
Yeah, I have a marketing company.
And what do you think the new normal will be for your business?
So I've already kind of seen some shift in how people are, going after marketing and what they're doing. So, they maybe were less likely to do Facebook ads or digital ads in general, and now they're leaning more toward doing things like that because they know that that's where people are looking right now, and that's where their audience is. So they need to get in front of them. So I've seen some shifts in what people are doing for marketing. And I've seen people that are sort of taking this as an opportunity to develop new services for their business that maybe they've always wanted to do but didn't have the time to do it, or had never thought about it and needed to be creative. And I think that kind of goes to your point about people being creative in this time or coming out of it in how they do business, and different businesses that may sort of come to light once this is all over. because I've seen a lot of people start to do like training and things like that, doing classes online, things like that. And all those things need to get marketed so that other people can find out about them, because the traditional networking is not the way people are getting out there anymore. So there's got to be some different avenues to do that.
And are any of you doing something really different with your time right now? Or is it just the continuation, but you're home?
For me, most of my stuff is from home for the most part anyway. So a lot of that stuff has been the same, but I've been trying to do things around the house more that I always put off. I'm not very, I'm usually the guy that hires people to do stuff, and because I usually don't have time to do it myself. And so now I've been trying to do some of that myself. I'm not very good at it, but.
Yeah. How about you, Laura?
I was just laughing because I have been going on 3-mile hikes every day. So.
And would you have done that before?
And, oh no, I was the work 60, 70 hours a week person. So, so this is definitely a new normal that I hope that I still get all that outside time in. But being a founding member of a community space, I hope that the new normal is not all in isolation, because we're banking on the fact that people want to be together to learn, and hands-on and demonstration and all that stuff is critical for us to be together. And I don't know about you all, but I miss going out to live music. That's my biggest thing.
Yeah. Have any of you noticed your eating habits have changed?
Oh, I think we've all gained 10 pounds at least, right?
Some people say that they're eating better. I'm not one of them. Although, I mean, better, I'm healthier.
I think I have actually found it to be a benefit. That's something I do a program usually every May through Get Fit New Hampshire, which is the gym in Concord, and they do a nutrition, like a kind of a nutrition challenge. That's really changed the way I've eaten probably over the last 4 years. So for me, the ability, I spend a lot of time on the road. I live in Hanover, New Hampshire. I drive to Concord a lot. I drive to Londonderry, as some of you know. So actually being able to control my meals and figure out what's in the fridge and decide from there, I've actually found it's better than trying to scramble around and, get breakfast at Tucker's or even like lunch at Live Juice, which is good. But, like it just, I'm in total control. So I've actually enjoyed that. I don't think I've gained a whole lot of weight, but it's more the working out, since it's just less inspiring to work out remotely than it is to go to 43 degrees north, or as a member in Concord. I think that's been more of a challenge, is actually working out and finding that regular routine. I've been running, which is good, but it's actually logging in and doing the workout as opposed to showing up at the class and having somebody tell you what to do. That's been challenging for
me. One of the things that when I think of my day, I think of it in 3-hour chunks. And I then create a routine inside those 3-hour chunks. So there's, as an example, between 6 and 9 o'clock, it's me getting ready for the day. That's always been the case. Then between 9 and 12, I do, I'm at my computer and I'm reading. I'm reading feeds I get from Harvard Business Review, generally business feeds, and I'm reading those. And then between 12 and 3 is lunch and often a nap. And then from 3 to 6 is open time. And then from 6 to 9, it's a little bit of television and getting ready for bed. And that's the way it is sort of every day. It's hard for me to take my 9 to 12 reading and shift it to the afternoon. It's indelible in my mind. That's what I'm doing. So I created a new routine because we like routines. And my routine is not hourly and not daily, but in 3-hour chunks. I'll say one other thing that I do. First, after I had my injury, I was a planner. And so I lived in the future. I was always worried about my next vacation, when I'm going to do this, when I'm going to do that. And my world shrunk to the present. So I think about today. I don't think much about tomorrow, and I don't think much about yesterday. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow unless I go to my calendar and see if there's something that I had put on my calendar, but right now I'm not thinking about it. But what's really important, every day when I wake up, I create something to look forward to. Not something to look forward to next week, not this weekend, not tomorrow, today. And it can be as simple as, hey, I just did this video thing with, 4 other people. That was fun. Or it could be asking my wife what she's cooking for dinner. But it's always something to look forward to, always something positive to keep my frame of reference, in a positive way.
Well, it's spot on because, now without, I'm used to even going to a co-working space during the day, right? That gets me out, it breaks up, it creates, I walk to the T stop, I ride on the T, I get there. Now, who knows what happens during the day? Usually there's a meal like lunch that breaks it up. There might be a meeting, so there's a lot of, self-reliability to create that schedule, right? To create those different events during the day that break it up. And that's something that I've now noticed I have to do for myself versus it just kind of happened for me. Like my day is filled up. Now someone will say, hey, do you want to have a meeting in a couple of days? And you're like, pick a time, wide open, but you also have to sort of think like, when's a good time to have that meeting? It's a very interesting way to sort of look at this sort of free schedule. You have to kind of add structure to it.
Yeah, kind of like lose track of what day it is too without that structure.
I thought it was a senior thing. I'm
No,
glad to hear
we're all
that
doing it now.
somebody else that I mentioned it to my son. I said last Thursday, I could have sworn it was Saturday, and then Friday I said, okay, now it's Saturday.
Yeah, what's
and
the Saturday?
finally we got to Saturday. But the other thing that's happened, I don't know if it's happened to you, is my time calibration has changed. And so if you think about what's transpired in the last month, doesn't it feel like a year? I mean, it feels a lot longer than a month. Things are so different. And a month from now, I suspect things are going to be different again. And it just seems like, what is that? Time compression, I guess, or time expansion. It's one of those. You know what I'm talking about, which is a month seems like a year. And
Yeah.
certainly in the internet age, in the .com age, or whatever we're calling what we're in, it used to be planning horizons, business planning horizons were 3 to 5 years. They're not 3 to 5 years anymore, right? They're 1 to 2 if you're lucky.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's hardest for me at work is not knowing when we can start doing things again. So if somebody said you have to wait until August and then, just do your events, do everything or whatever, it'd be so much easier the anxiety of not knowing how to, it's like inertia really, because you don't know. Everything we do is event based. And, if someone told me, yes, you can plan your July events, I'd be all over it. But not knowing, it's hard to get started doing anything. So.
Yeah, and it's like, well, who's going to decide that it's okay you can do your event? And what's going
Right.
to go through their minds in making that decision?
Right. I mean, at least at this point, at least we need, the stay-at-home order to be lifted before we can start doing anything that's not virtual. But, and then people will decide what they want to participate in over time. Like you said, I agree. But the not knowing when it's going to kick back in, it's really hard for me to get any motivation to do anything. So like house projects and long walks and I live by myself.
If you think about Uber, do you think that the future of Uber is going to be much greater or much less?
That's an interesting question, because you have both sides of that, because you have people that are not going to want to travel as much in this big public transportation. So if you can take an Uber instead of taking the T or something, you could make that argument. But at the same time, how often do you want to just start jumping into a car with a random person? And I mean, there's some sort of, I feel like with a taxi driver, there's some sort of credibility. They have the glass between you two, usually a plexiglass, but in Uber, you literally just jump into somebody's car. You have no idea. I mean, it's always been a weird concept, jumping into somebody's car. You have no idea who they are, whether they have a driver's license or what their background is, and just hoping for the best. But I don't know.
Or who was last sitting where you're sitting?
Exactly. I don't know. I could see it being more difficult, as in I'll take my own car, or I'll take my chances on public transportation, because at least I don't know. There's some things you can control. On public transportation, you could wear a mask if you were worried about that. You could wear gloves. I don't know. You're sitting in a car next to somebody having conversation. I don't know. I don't know why I feel more comfortable with public transportation, other than I feel like it's a system, as opposed to Uber's never really been regulated.
So I think there are a number of things that are in our subconscious that will only become moved to the conscious when we have some experience. So we got to go someplace. I would normally take an Uber. Now, wait a minute, what am I going to do? Am I going to take an Uber or not take an Uber? Am I going to drive? Am I going to take public transportation? The other thing that I did not mention is discretionary spending. So people's incomes are down. In general, people's incomes are down. Some people who live paycheck to paycheck are really, in some deep financial difficulty. But if you think about discretionary spending now, remember our economy is 70% consumer spending. And if discretionary spending is down, what does that mean for our entire economy? And so, our president thinks there's going to be maybe a big bang. All this pent up demand is going to come back. I think for some people that is absolutely true. And for other people, I think that wait a minute, I don't know, can I defer that? Either defer it, or do I really need it? Do I really need that Starbucks, latte? Or can I just get by with my at-home Keurig? So who knows? It's again, we'll know it after we know it. Trying to figure it all out, it just doesn't work that way. Can make guesses, but we'll know it when we know it.
I kind of feel
for time, Jim. Go ahead.
I guess. Sorry, I think we are at time, but I kind of feel like it doesn't. we don't need to go too far down the political rabbit hole. I don't think it necessarily matters who's sitting in the Oval Office or anything. I think we're just, as you said, we're in a point where people are going to be more conservative and tighter on their purse strings. And I think that there's some hope that the economy bounces back quickly, and that's some of the policy they're trying to put in place. But I don't think that there's anything that they can do to make most of us feel more comfortable about spending money. I think we'll head into a downtime. I think the one positive, as opposed to if you compare to where we were, I want to say 11 years ago, 2008, 2009, is that nothing's particularly broken. Our financial system's not broken like it was 10 years ago. So there's opportunity to recover in relatively due time. But obviously with the election coming up, Donald Trump would like it to recover faster. And I just don't think that that's something that anybody really has control over, is the purse strings that we all decide. Glenn, as you said, what do we spend our discretionary money on?
That's all correct. And you know, the way the economy comes back and how fast it comes back is a function of how we relate to it. It's not somebody telling us, okay, it's time for you to go to restaurants now. It's how we relate to the ability to go to a restaurant and the cautions that we have and how we view the risks associated with that. And it's going to be less than it was before for some period of time. And although we haven't talked about this, we have interrelated economies. So, you know, as we relate to Asia and as we relate to Europe or the European Union, and how those economies are, will influence us.
So if anyone has any sort of wrap-up thoughts or questions, I think now might be a good time, as we have sort of gotten into the 1 o'clock area, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if we have other things to move on to, before we do that, if we have any kind of final thoughts or questions, I think now is a good time for that. All right, Glenn, thanks a lot. This has been very helpful, and I greatly appreciate you joining us. And to everyone else, thank you for participating.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Glenn.
Glenn.
Thank you.
Good to meet
Stay
you.
healthy and stay safe.
Yep.
Likewise.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.